the case of the Red Sea, and Yemenis, after 12 years of tremendous pressure, they came out and put a blockade, a siege on Saudi Arabia because of the situation in the Strait of Hormuz. The pressure they're putting on Saudi Arabia is tremendous because there is no way to for them to export oil except using the Suez Canal, and which has its own limitations.
Exactly.
What is your understanding of the way that Yemen is putting pressure on Saudi Arabia, and how do you see this Saudi Arabia's response to what is going on?
Well, I think the international portrayal of what the Houthis, Ansar Allah, are doing is not correct. They are portraying the Houthis as stooges or agents of Iran. That is not the case. This is a Houthi war on Saudi Arabia, which has its own rationale. You know, the Houthis have sat there during the 5 months of the American assault, Israeli assault on Iran, and done nothing. What provoked this was the internationally recognized government, which is sponsored by Saudi Arabia, evidently carried out an attack on Sana'a airport, trying to prevent a Yemeni delegation from going and returning to Iran for the funeral of the Ayatollah Khamenei. And the Yemenis, the Houthis, blame the Saudis for this attack. That may be correct, maybe not, I don't know. But basically, they have, after having 4 years of a truce with Saudi Arabia, they are back at war with the kingdom. And the Saudis have been very restrained in their response. I mean, they have obviously denounced the action by the Houthis. The Houthis are, in fact, enforcing a blockade against Saudi Arabia. What is not clear at present is whether the blockade affects anyone else. In other words, this is clearly the Yemenis acting against the Saudis, but are the Yemenis in fact supporting Iran? Certainly, from a factual point of view, this increases Iranian leverage on the United States and the world very considerably, because it further reduces the supply of oil. And it does so at a time when oil storage is running out. Basically, Saudi Arabia has been able, through the use of a pipeline, to export 4.5 million barrels of oil a day through Yanbu, which is a port on the Red Sea, an industrial city and port. And now, as you said, they are limited to the use of the Suez Canal. That probably cuts that 4.5 million barrels down to 1.5 or 2. So that means about half or 2/3 reduction in the amount of oil that the Saudis can sell. And their economy has been under pressure despite the higher oil prices, which are now back as a result of this. So this hurts Saudi Arabia. What is the background here? I think it's more complicated than just the Saudi-Yemeni issue, because we also have first the American announcement of a nuclear deal with Saudi Arabia, and then Donald Trump basically adding a new condition which the Saudis will absolutely refuse to meet, and therefore this nuclear deal is no more. And we can talk about the nuclear issue if you want, but I think it's important to separate what's going on between Yemenis and Saudis from what's going on between Iran and the United States and Iran and the Gulf Arabs.
I think the issue of the nuclear program is important. One of them is the technical part. They want to have this program on their soil, as UAE has that program. And Donald Trump said that it's gonna be something similar to what UAE has, no enrichment on their soil, but they're gonna have a nuclear facility in Saudi Arabia. The other point, as you mentioned, is normalization with Israel, Abraham Accord. They said that is necessary before, but it seems that the talks between countries, they didn't mention that condition. And Donald Trump
No,
put in something else. Yeah.
this is more of a commentary on Donald Trump than anything else. First of all, his description of what was agreed with the Saudis is not correct. They got a much better deal, including the right of enrichment, than the UAE did. So I assume that Mohammed bin Zayed is now annoyed with Mohammed bin Salman for yet another reason. They've had bad relationship recently. This is a very loose agreement that was agreed. It would have been sternly opposed by many in the U.S. Congress, and therefore its prospects were uncertain. But Donald Trump then added this other condition of normalization with Israel. Why did he do that? I suspect Benjamin Netanyahu called him and said, you have to do that. So this shows that he's still the puppet of Netanyahu and responsive to Israeli interests. There are a lot of ironies here. If this agreement had gone forward, and it will not now, it is dead, I think, because of Trump's additional term. If it were to go forward, the United States is not really in a position to build a reactor in Saudi Arabia. The American nuclear industry is on its deathbed. And ironically, the principal American nuclear technology for reactors, which is owned by Westinghouse Electric, which is the company that builds these things, that is owned now by two Canadian companies. So the same time that Donald Trump is putting punitive tariffs on Canada, he's giving two Canadian companies an opportunity to compete for nuclear reactors in Saudi Arabia. Let me go back here. When the U.S. did a deal, a 1-2-3 deal, it's called, with the United Arab Emirates, opening the market supposedly to American vendors of nuclear reactors, the Emirates immediately turned to Korea, and the South Koreans built the reactors. This was all a bit of a fraud anyway. Why this? Because the Saudis have been restricting American use of their military facilities. They have shown an independence that is very unwelcome to the Trump White House. So basically, I think the nuclear deal was a payoff. Bribe, stick with us. We'll give you something that you couldn't get before. And then, of course, now I imagine Mohammed bin Salman is deeply embarrassed by Donald Trump adding the question of normalization with Israel to this. I mean, the Abraham Accords themselves are on life support. And the idea that Saudi Arabia would join them when the polls show close to 100% of Saudis are opposed to normalization with Israel, given Israel's mistreatment of the Palestinians, and when the official position of Riyadh is that it will not normalize with Israel until a Palestinian state is brought into existence. This is just foolishness. So I would say Donald Trump, first of all, doesn't understand what was agreed with Saudi Arabia. He is not in touch with the details. Second, he does not understand the weakness of the American nuclear industry. Third, he does not understand that the nuclear industry in the United States is now owned by Canadians. And fourth, he doesn't understand that Israel is now poison. Nobody wants to have a normal relationship with Israel. And Israel itself is falling apart. You have, we could talk about that if you want. I'll just say, 1/6 of the Israeli population has been so-called Haredim. That means the ultra-Orthodox. 1/3 of young Israelis are Haredim. 1/3. They will not register for service in the military. There are 80,000 Haredim youth who have refused to register for the military. Women in the Haredim community, the ultra-Orthodox community, do not perform the alternative service that is required if you don't register for the military. They do not believe in the legitimacy of the state of Israel. They opposed Israel's declaration of independence. They cite a religious principle which says that the Holy Land cannot be conquered by force legitimately. And more recently, one of their most prominent religious scholars and rabbis, spokesman, has cited the Ten Commandments injunction, thou shalt not kill, and said, what is Israel doing with the Palestinians? It is violating God's law. So they are deeply alienated. In addition to that group, of course, you now have the so-called hilltop youth and other settlers, Israeli settlers, who are murdering Palestinians, beating up old ladies and children, and burning houses and cars in the West Bank. And as we speak, Israel is building a wall to take 70% of Gaza for settlement and restricting the Palestinians to only 1/3 of the land that they had before. So all of this is going on. And this is the moment for Saudi Arabia to normalize with Israel? No, not at all. And the president is he's just shown a complete inability to negotiate. He's very good at transactional bullying, which is what he's doing with Iran. I would say, actually, no, with Iran, this is just senseless violence because there is no feasible objective here. I mean, basically, CENTCOM says what it is doing is attriting the Iranian capability to control the Strait of Hormuz. That's what it says it's doing. But in fact, it's attacking targets in the interior of Iran as well as along the coast. So that explanation is not very plausible. Meantime, Iran is attriting the ability of the United States to continue this war. The bases that the United States had in the Persian Gulf are almost all empty. They have been destroyed. There are still bases in Bahrain of a limited nature, and there are bases in Kuwait. But the United States has been driven back to Jordan, and it will be driven back to Israel eventually. And when and if Donald Trump, who says that he's going to approve a much larger strike on Iran than any previously carried out, when and if he does that, I think Iran will strike Israel. So the war is widening. The Houthis, for their own reasons, are at war with the Saudis. The Saudis are being very careful not to escalate against the Houthis, for the time being at least. The Iranians are striking Kuwait and Bahrain, the two remaining American protectorates in the Gulf. The United States' position in Jordan is under severe attack. Everybody in the Gulf is trying to do a deal with Iran. They are all looking for alternatives to reliance on the United States. The position of the United States is weakening. And meanwhile, the American military, whom Donald Trump doesn't appear to listen to, are saying that the pace of the war is depleting American ammunition and defensive capabilities at an alarming rate, weakening the United States globally and depriving the United States of its ability to confront other challenges elsewhere. So this is a very bad show by the president, and it has no prospect of success for him. And he is more unpopular in the United States than ever, and so is Israel, and so is this war.
When it comes to the attack on Yemen, the Sana'a International Airport, it's so strange somehow because on one side, if you see the United States and Saudi Arabia, let's assume first Saudi Arabia, they were using the Red Sea to export oil. They knew that the Strait of Hormuz had its own difficulties. Strait is somehow closed, and the war is going on there. And on the other hand, you see their attack coming. They're attacking Sana'a International Airport. The Access reported that the United States, Donald Trump supported that attack. And you look at the situation with the Strait of Hormuz, you see the same thing. Donald Trump is not going to benefit from a new conflict with Yemen. He doesn't want that. He started that in 2025. He said that we're going to get out of the Red Sea. They're not going to make any sort of problem for us. So coming in, just having the problem in the Persian Gulf, and again attacking Yemen, how is that going to benefit the United States? How is that going to benefit this Saudi Arabia? It's so strange to understand, because I see nothing, no strategic thinking if we assume these two countries supporting each other attack, Yemen.
No, there is no strategic rationale behind this, which is one reason that I suspect the attack on the Sana'a airport was carried out by the Saudi-sponsored, so-called internationally recognized government of Yemen, not directly by the Saudis. And I don't know how that happened, because it doesn't make any sense from the Saudi point of view to risk the closure of the Bab el-Mandeb, which is now closed to their shipping. And that is cargoes entering the Bab el-Mandeb with a destination of a Saudi port, let's say Jizan port or Jeddah or Yanbu, they're not going to be allowed to come in. And Saudi tankers loaded with oil will be fired upon if they try to escape through the south and through the Bab el-Mandeb. So it makes no sense at all. You mentioned the American campaign against the Houthis earlier, and which ended with the United States basically having accomplished nothing, declaring victory and leaving. And I think this is a precedent for the war with Iran, because there is no prospect at all of a negotiated solution to this war now. That is because, first of all, as I said, Donald Trump does not know how to negotiate. All he knows how to do is bully, and bullying is not going to bring about an Iranian surrender, which is what he is demanding. The Strait of Hormuz is going to remain under Iranian control. How Iran exercises that control will be important in terms of its regional role. Whether it brings the Gulf Arabs into the arrangement somehow and takes account of their interests as well as its own will be important. But we're not there yet. And we're not going to get there at the negotiating table, especially because the American negotiators, Witkoff and Kushner, are untrustworthy and untrusted, amateurish, and ineffectual. So there is no prospect of anything but a military outcome. And the military outcome is probably going to be heavily influenced by the depletion of American ammunition and defensive capabilities that I mentioned. This is a matter of deep concern to the American military. They are beginning to leak complaints about this to the press. So Donald Trump has got another set of problems on his desk. His military are not very impressed with him, and but I don't think there is any strategy here at all. And again, I would say that the Houthi or Ansar Allah conflict with the Saudis is really rooted in Yemeni interests and Yemeni history and the history of Saudi Arabia's relationships with Yemen and the divisions of Yemenis from one from another. I mean, Yemen has always been a country that has had deep divisions and at various points had multiple regimes, two or more different governments, which it does at the present time. So that's not going to get solved either. And I don't think the United States has the number of forces to be able to oppose the Houthis. And I don't think the Saudis want to oppose the Houthis because they will want to work out some deal with the Houthis. And that, so we'll see what happens. But I agree with you. There's no strategic rationale for this at all.